For those of you who don't know me, my name is Phil Nazzaro. I am the current town moderator, as the previous town moderator resigned his position. We will open, as usual, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Town Councilman Eric Boderman will lead us.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As was Clay's tradition, since I'm finishing out Clay's term, I think that it's only fitting that we have a moment of silence for the residents that have departed us since our last deliberative session, as well as those who are deployed overseas in our armed services. Thank you. Before we begin tonight, I would like to take a moment just to recognize the service of Clay Mitchell, the former moderator. He served for several years as moderator very honorably, and I just think that, just for the record, I'd like it noted the town's thanks for his service. So I'm going to take a couple minutes up front just to review the procedures of the meeting. Forgive me for reading straight off a piece of paper. I know it's not the most eloquent way to communicate, but each member who wishes to vote in this meeting should have checked in with the ballot clerks. If you are a registered voter and have not checked in yet, please do so now. Non-voters are respectfully requested to remain in the designated area for non-voters so as to ensure no confusion during voting. The designated area for non-voters is the table at the back of the room. The rules for this meeting will be Robert's Rules of Order as modified by the moderator in accordance with the laws of the state of New Hampshire. The role of the moderator is to fairly organize and regulate the meeting according to the rules agreeable to the members. The meeting is not my meeting, but the town's. Directly following a moderator's decision, any member may appeal the decision. This is accomplished through calling a point of order and making a motion to appeal the decision. A second is required. The ruling and the appeal will be explained to the meeting. Then the members will vote to sustain or reverse the ruling. Our meeting this evening is for the transaction of all business other than voting by official ballot. This first session shall consist of explanation, discussion, and debate of each warrant article. Amendments to articles are in order and will be voted on at this meeting. However, at the conclusion of our deliberation on each article, we will not vote. Instead, the chair will instruct the town clerk to place the article on the official ballot. Our order of the day is the town warrant. The chair will read each article, then afford a member of the town an opportunity to discuss the background of the article. For the two petitioned articles, a petitioner will be afforded the opportunity to explain the background for the article. The floor is open to all registered voters. If you wish to address the meeting, please approach the microphone at the front of the room. The chair will recognize members at the microphone in turn. Non-voters, save employees of the town, will not be allowed to speak. However, if the town desires to hear a non-voter speak, we will have a vote and the town will decide. When it is your turn to speak, please step up to the microphone and speak directly into it. All remarks must be confined to the merits of the pending question or to questions of order and privilege, and all remarks should be addressed to the chair. When you are recognized, please state your name and address. Each speaker is asked to limit his or her comments to 5 minutes. You may speak as many times as you wish, but all members who wish to speak will have a turn first before anyone has a second. The overriding principle in all cases is fairness. A speaker may address the currently pending questions, or he or she may move to close the debate, but they may not do the same in the single turn. This means that if a speaker agrees for or against a motion, he or she may not then conclude their remarks with, "And I move to call the previous question." Any motion made to call the question or limit debate requires a 2/3 majority to pass. Again, the overriding principle behind this is fairness. A secret ballot will be conducted when requested by 5 members in writing prior to a voice or hand vote. Such request must be made for a specific vote, not for all votes in this meeting or all amendments to this article. The secret ballot provision exists to offer secrecy and is not intended to be used as a tactic of delay. If you wish to request a secret ballot, please approach the microphone and, when recognized, make the request, then pass the written note to the moderator. Otherwise, voting will be by voice vote. If the chair cannot judge a clear majority, he will move to a hand vote. with the ballot clerks counting hands. Any voter who doubts the accuracy of any non-counted vote may require the moderator to determine the vote by a counted show of hands. 5 voters may request a recount on a written ballot vote, providing the voting margin is not more than 10% of the total vote cast. If requested, the recount will occur immediately following the public announcement of the vote. Any member can move to restrict reconsideration of a vote. This motion requires a second and a majority vote. Restricting reconsideration can occur only after the motion passes. Bond articles are automatically restricted from reconsideration. If there is something you wish to accomplish at the meeting, but you are uncertain how to proceed, please ask. You can do that at any time by approaching the microphone. Similarly, if during the meeting there is anything that is unclear to you, please rise to a point of inquiry and ask for an explanation. Again, this is the town's meeting. The role of the moderator is to ensure civility and that the meeting moves along fairly and in an expeditious manner. At the end of the day, we are all here because we are neighbors and we care about Newmarket. Let's be civil to each other in our discussions, and I will work justly to moderate the meeting. If there are no questions, we'll proceed with the reading of the warrant. To the inhabitants of the town of Newmarket, in the county of Rockingham, in said state, qualified to vote in the town affairs, you are hereby notified of the annual meeting. The first session for the transaction of all business other than voting by official ballot shall be held Tuesday, April 5th, 2011, at 7 p.m. at the Newmarket Town Hall. The first session shall consist of explanation, discussion, and debate of each warrant article. Warrant articles may be amended subject to the following limitations. Warrant articles whose wording is prescribed by law shall not be amended. B, warrant articles that are amended shall be placed on the official ballot for final vote in the main motion as amended. The second session of the annual meeting to elect officers of the town by official ballot to vote on questions required by law to be inserted on said official ballot and to vote on all budget warrant articles from the first session on the official ballot shall be held Tuesday, May 10th, 2011 at Newmarket Town Hall. The poll shall be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. would be way too short. 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If there are any questions, I'll move on to the reading of the first article. Article 1, to choose all necessary town officers for the ensuing year. Town Council, 3 for 3 years, 1 for 1 year. Budget Committee, 3 for 3 years, 1 for 1 year. Town Moderator, 1 for 1 year. Planning Board, 2 for 3 years, 1 for 1 year. Trustees of the Trust Fund, 1 for 3 years. Treasurer, 1 for 3 years. Is there any discussion on Article 1? Any discussion? All right, it will be placed on the ballot as read. Article 2. Bond for the development of the McIntosh well to include electric service, wellhead development, piping, land purchase, and treatment plant. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,370,250 gross budget for the development of the McIntosh well to include electric service, wellhead development, piping, land purchase, and treatment plant, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $3,370,250 of bonds and notes in accordance with the determined that. Well, that's not English. I don't know what that was. I got an old version. Hold on. Yeah, me too. Here we go. I'm going to start that one again. I know it's fascinating up front, so let me do this again. Article 2, bond for the development of the McIntosh well to include electric service, wellhead development, piping, land purchase, and treatment plant. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,370,250 gross budget for the development of the McIntosh well to include electric service, wellhead development, piping, land purchase, and treatment plant, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $3,370,250 of bonds and notes in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, NHRSA 33-1, as amended, and to authorize the town council to issue and negotiate such bonds or notes and to determine the rate of interest thereon. Further, to authorize the town council to apply for, negotiate, contract for, seek, and do all things necessary to obtain such federal and state grants in aid contribution, assistance, and to participate in the State Revolving Fund, SRF, RSA 486-14, established for this purpose as may be available, and to adopt any resolution relating thereto, and to take such other actions as may be necessary to effect the issuance, negotiation, sale, and delivery of such bonds or notes as shall be in the best interest of the town of Newmarket. A 3/5 ballot is required. It was recommended by the town council by a vote of 6-0.
Two-thirds.
That's right. I'm sorry. It's 2/3. I have an old copy. A two-thirds ballot vote is required. It was recommended by the town council at a vote of 6-0 and a budget committee by a vote of 6-4. Is there any discussion?
Point of order?
Yes.
My copy says 3/5.
So we're going to, we had a discussion before the meeting on this. I'll allow the town's lawyer to explain the nuances of this.
Vote says pound sign.
Thank you. The change that's noted,
Can't hear you.
you all have copies that say 3/5, and approximately 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, in reviewing this with bond counsel, it was determined that there was a change in the law, which is RSA 33-8, that occurred in 2004, that changed the vote required in a town council form of government that has a town charter to go from 3/5, what it was previously, to 2/3, unless the town charter specified one or the other. And so, as a result of that provision, this vote requires a 2/3 vote on the recommendation of bond counsel.
Does that make sense to everyone? So what it comes down to is that a 2/3 vote is required for this, based on current New Hampshire statute. Is there any discussion on this warrant article?
Yeah, hi, Phil Bourne, Pine Street, Newmarket. I know this water thing's been going on ever since I moved to town 12 years ago, and I'm pretty certain it's been going on for a lot longer than that. And I was just wondering what the 4 dissenting votes on the Budget Committee were for, and I'm also wondering if people have considered the fact that if we increase the water production in town, if that's going to have a ramification for wastewater treatment plant down the road.
I'll defer to the members of the Budget Committee.
Are you answering his question?
All right. We'll let the chair answer the question, and then Mr. Philly.
And then Leo can do the detail. The Budget Committee supports the location and the well. The dissenting votes were concerned that we didn't necessarily need to do the treatment plant. So they didn't think we needed to authorize the bonding for that portion of the cost. That's a succinct summary of the concerns. But if I understand the discussion, the 4 dissenters thought this well is a good location for water. They were not convinced that we needed the treatment plant for it.
Is it the town's opinion that we definitely need to increase water production in the town?
I think there's a universal support for that.
I mean,
From the discussions I've been involved with and on the Budget Committee.
and the levels of the groundwater, they've been dropping in the existing wells, or?
The existing wells are both gravel-packed wells. Very susceptible to droughts or other contamination. Luckily, we haven't had anything at this point. This well is a bedrock well, which is completely in a different part of town, so that if we had a drought situation, we'd still be able to get water out of this location. And there is general consensus in town that we need additional water. And to answer the second part of your question, adding additional water supply does not impact the size of the wastewater treatment plant. The only thing that impacts that is if new users come on to the system and that don't have water now and are then tied into the sewer. This in and of itself does not have any effect on a potential wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Fillion.
My name's Leo Fillion. I live on 3 Lafayette Avenue. Been a registered professional engineer for over 40 years and was on the Newmarket Board of Water Commissioners when the Bennett Well was established and when Sewer Well was established. In response to the comment just made, I read all the Weston and Sampson reports and Emery and Garrett reports, and I was told at one of the meetings that there would be 30,000 gallons of water if it went to the EGR method that would be sent to the wastewater treatment plant. And this is equivalent to wastewater from a 180 lot subdivision for single-family homes. So 60,000 gallons, no, 30,000 gallons a day, and the treatment cost at the regular price would be $56,000 a year if the council agreed that the water department would have to pay for sewage treatment. I guess that's that question. My other comment I have in regards to the necessity for treatment. I'll put this on a wall for just people who want to see it. That is a chart that Emery and Garrett made when they ran the 34-day pump test on the McIntosh well. The water level on the well started at 320 parts per million, milligrams per liter of, let me get my numbers ready here. The chlorides initially started at 320 milligrams per liter and dropped to 200 milligrams per liter in 34 days, which is well below the 250 milligrams allowed in the state statutes for secondary treatment. More importantly, the chloride concentration dropped 40 milligrams in the last 5 days of pumping and was still dropping at over 6 milligrams per day of pumping when the tests were concluded. There was no drop in the amount, the way the level was dropping in the last 5 days. And at the rate it was going, we would be down. We don't really know how far it would have dropped. That's my concern, is that we're committing to a $2.5 million treatment plant, and the water in the McIntosh well has never stabilized, so no one really knows whether or not we're going to need this treatment. And the same thing occurred in the sodium levels. That dropped from 250 to 170 milligrams per liter, and it was also dropping continuously at the point where the pumping was stopped. That is below the secondary levels established by the state of New Hampshire, which is 250 milligrams per liter. And that's why I have concerns that there is no need. We should be doing more long-term testing of this well before we commit to spending $2.5 million to provide treatment for it, until we find out what the stabilized concentrations will be. The arsenic level on the well was below the state's primary standards at the beginning, throughout the test, and was at the end of the test. The manganese level dropped from 1.1 parts per million to 0.57, which is almost to the limits that is allowed by the state secondary standards. And according to the charts that you see up there, you can see that it was continually dropping when the pumping was stopped. That's my concern, is that I think it's premature to talk about spending $2.5 million for a treatment plant for water that has not yet stabilized, and we really don't know if it's needed. Emory and Garrett, in their tests, determined that no further testing should be done to see if pumping is needed, and it's going to take a longer term pumping before we really know. I guess that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillion. The chairman of the town council wants to make a response.
Yeah, first of all, I'm a professional engineer also, just like Mr. Fillion. He and I disagree on this subject. We have had meetings upon meetings with professionals in the water business who have told us that we should treat this water. I'm not a water expert, and I don't think anybody out here is, and I don't think Leo Fillion is a water quality expert. This well is only going to run 8 hours a day, every day. It's not going to run 50 days straight like a pump test did. This bond, if it were to pass, would give us the authority to treat the water if we needed to. Everything I've been told at this point in time, I believe we need to treat it. But just if this passes, it does not mean that we're going to go out and spend the money right away. There's still going to be public hearings held on it. We're still going to have discussions about it. This would just give us the authority to do it. And with all due respect to Mr. Fillion, I've sat in meetings that he sat in where our experts have said that they would never put this water into a system and have people drink it without treating it. I don't need any more information than that. I know Leo, his heart is in the right place and he doesn't want to spend the money, but the chart he put up there is misleading. That water level was pumped for 56 days straight, 24 hours a day. It will never run like that when it's in production. So make no mistake about it, there's a lot of discussion that still needs to be had on this, but this would just give us the authority to do it. It's not, if this passes, we're not going to go out tomorrow and spend $3 million and do it, but there's still a lot of things that have to happen. It would just give us the authority.
Mr. Hart?
There's a lot of people here tonight, which is great, and some of you might not be up to speed on the last 10 years of water exploration effort. So I thought it might be helpful to have a brief understanding of the other options that we have explored in the past 10 years. We first evaluated the water treatment plant, which is on Packers Falls Road by the Piscassic River. And some of you might remember that that was estimated to cost $12 to $15 million to retrofit it to the standards back in 2003. And those standards have probably gotten more stringent. So the council decided that was not a viable option. Then we hired a firm to do ground fracture analysis of the bedrock in all of Newmarket. And they identified about 3 or 4 locations that, because of those analysis, would be good for groundwater wells. At the same time, we explored Follett's Brook off of Packers Falls Road as a source, because it historically was a source. Unfortunately, it was determined it didn't have enough water or necessarily would be permittable underneath the state's systems, so that was dropped. The bedrock fracture analysis took several years, and negotiations with the landowners took several years, and that's how we got to the point today where you actually have an agreement in place. The town has the ability to withdraw this water from the McIntosh property, and what you have in front of you as this warrant article is the maximum exposure of the town to get that source created. And I think that's important to realize, because the council would have been damned if they came here with the low end and then next year came back and asked for another $1.5 million to do the water treatment plant. What they're saying is, and I think it's the best approach, is the maximum we expect this to cost to complete the drilling of the well, laying the pipe, putting in the pumping system, and building a treatment plant that so far has been suggested is necessary is the figure you have here. And they might decide, based on those tests, once we actually put this into production, that it's not necessary. It is not a guarantee that all this money will be spent. And I think a couple other points would be, the people who are paying for this are the people who are on the water supply system. If you have a private well, you are not paying for this. So I'd hope you would support it, because we all have been, we used to have water that tasted like chlorine byproducts, that tasted like the river. Now the water quality is pretty good from the sandbed aquifers up at the Bennett well and the Sewell well. But if we have another bad drought, we're going to need this well. And if we have a contamination issue, we're going to need this well. If we want our hydrants flushed, we're going to need this well. It's the best choice that we have before us. Of all the choices, we have looked at this pretty thoroughly. So I'd ask you to consider supporting it and understanding that it's the maximum cost that the council expects this to be. It's not halfway there. It's the full boat to get there.
Any other discussion, sir?
William Foster, 11 Lanes Lane. I'm a little confused. First, you said, Mr. Bodeman, that it was about contamination and or drought for the original well, or wells, I should say. Will this new well be used in conjunction with what we currently have? And if so, how will that be spread out? As Brian kind of said, I'm on town water. How will that impact everyday expenditures per person, I should say?
That's a good question. The well water that would come out of this well, we've been told, is not of sufficient quality that we should mix it right into the tank that we have. We should treat it first. If we don't treat it, and if there is a way of mixing it in, if we have a problem with the two existing wells, then we have no water, because this well virtually can't stand alone. So if we don't have those other supplies, this well can't stand alone unless it's treated. That's what we've been told. So it's a good question in that it needs the treatment to be able to stand alone and function without the other wells, which is what the goal was when this town, like Brian said, many years ago started looking for water. The idea was to get additional water sources that can be used on their own if anything happened, if we had a drought and we couldn't draw from the other wells. As far as the cost analysis, I know Sean is in the back. I know Sean has some information that he can go over as far as what this would mean for water users.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. What I did is I took a 2009 and I looked at 2010 water consumption, and what I did is I looked at it and I broke it down into residential water use. That means I took out all the commercial, all the industrial. I looked at per unit, per resident. So the cost on a 20-year loan would be about $77.53 for the average water user. And what I have for an average water user is roughly 5,100 cubic feet of water, which is equivalent to 38,625 gallons of usage a year. So that is for a 20-year bond at 4%. The other thing that we'd be looking at doing is putting an application for the state revolving loan, which has some forgiveness to it. That would take place in June of this year, and we'd find out in September if we were going to get it. That would be about $56 to $60 per year per unit.
Thank you. Sir?
Is that, I don't know, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. Is that per year or per quarter?
Per year.
Per year, thank you.
Yes.
Any other discussion on this article?
Hi, I'm Linda Fecto from 244 Ash Swamp Road. My question is, I live right near where those are going in, where you want to do the well. What is going to happen to the water in the area up there if you start treating? What's going to happen to the groundwater around it? is there a possibility that it could affect my well and every well that's around there? And what are the chances that once you start running that my well and other wells in the area could even dry up?
I'll ask Sean to speak to the details, but we, during the pump test, they tested various wells around the location. I live right around the corner from you. And they, as part of the testing requirements of the state, you need to, as you draw down, as you do the pump test, you need to ensure that you're not going to dry up other people's wells. So I don't remember what the exact results were, but Sean, could you?
We basically put in piezometers around the well and in private wells to determine what the drawdown was, to make sure that we would not be impacting other area wells. As part of our permit, we are required for the next couple of years while we operate this well, not only before we start operating it, but before we start operating, determining what the ground level waters are, and we're supposed to monitor it as we go along. So we're actually dedicated as part of our permit to monitor the wells to make sure that we're not impacting other people's water sources. And that's through the state. Okay?
Thanks, Sean. Any other discussion on this article?
George Willant, 42 Shanda Drive. I just have one question in terms of the treatment. What's DES as a stance on that? Department of Environmental Services. I mean, I assume they have to permit this well.
Yes, yes. DES, from what I understand, this water is technically permittable through DES. What I've also been told is, and I wasn't at the meeting, but I've heard secondhand, was that DES has said they've never seen water of this quality. It's very, very high in sodium, which the experts have said would be even though it's permittable, it would not taste very good. And it would potentially, it would have the potential to affect water heaters and other things in the houses that use water.
Okay.
Is that correct, Sean? Did I say that right?
Yes. Thank you.
Sir.
Doug Hamilton, 33 Lamprey Street. Just one question regarding the funding. It says here also seeking possible federal or state aid. In reality, is there anything existing now that has helped other towns, or is this just kind of put in there to make us feel better?
No, there is a source of funding. I don't think there's a whole lot of federal funding, to be honest with you, but the state does have a fund, and Sean can speak to that. I just read a thing in the paper yesterday that I can't remember which town in here just got $1 million towards a water supply well. So Northampton or Hampton or something. Sean, can you speak to the funding?
As part of our meeting with DES, I spoke with Rick Skorinka about the SRF program to see if it was still a viable program, and he assured me that they have come up with the necessary matching funds for the feds so that it will be a program. I don't know how much money will be available for the program, but he did say that this was a good project for that program. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to get it, but we're going to put our application in June, and we'll hear by around August, September whether we get into it.
Is there any other discussion on the article? Sarah.
Number 7 Exeter Road, Newmarket. The wells we have now, who owns that land?
The town does.
Town does.
And the water we're going to get from McIntosh, are we going to own that land?
We have an easement.
Well, explain the easement. I mean, we're not going to own the land, right?
We're going to own the land in 20 years. In 20 years. We're making payments on it. Right now, we have an easement. In 20 years, we will own the land.
In other words, you're paying the owner now
Yes,
so much, your contract?
yes.
Can you tell us what it is?
Sure, there's no secrets. We're paying $20,000 a year for 20 years. No escalators, basically no interest, which was a very, very reasonable price.
Okay.
Mr. Fillion.
Yeah, comment, I kind of disagree. I read the easement, and we will be paying $20,000 a year for 20 years, but the easement will be in perpetuity, and if at any time in the future, the town decides they don't want to use this well, they have 6 months in which to remove all the parts that are part of the well from the property at any time in the future. So we will never own this property, but we will have an easement in perpetuity, and if we ever decide in the future that we do not want to continue pumping this well, we have 6 months to take the wellhead and everything off the property to do that.
Ed, and then Mr. Glennon.
I'd just like to clarify what Mr. Fillion just mentioned. In working out the negotiations on the wellhead, we agreed that we would pay $400,000, as the chair pointed out, in $20,000 installments over 20 years. One of the things we provided in the contract was that if at some point in time the well is not viable for the town, and let's say it's in year 5, and we find that the water is of a quality that we are not able to treat it or put it into the system, that we have the ability, as Mr. Fillion said, to notice the property owner that we are going to cease using the well and we have no further payments. However, if we go to the full 20 years, and on the 21st year, the town owns that land free and clear in perpetuity. So we provided an opt-out in case the well is not of the quality that we feel is sufficient for the community, but it also, at the end of 20 years, the town would own that wellhead and the area around it, lock, stock, and barrel.
I just want to make a comment, and I'm not disputing Sean's comment about the state funding. I think we all need to stop and think here, because we just realized in the last 2 weeks that the town of Newmarket has lost between the school and the town approximately $500,000 in state revenues. So even though we're hearing that those monies are going to be there, good chance they're going to be there, I've said it before and I'll say it again. People who are looking down that tunnel and think there's a light there, there is not a light. We got hit, like a lot of towns in the state of New Hampshire the last 2 weeks. That was a train that was coming. We got hit. And there's going to be other issues coming next year with the state with funding. So I'm not going to speak to whether I'm in favor or whether I'm against. I'm just saying be cautious, because if the revenues are not coming to the state, to the towns, guess where they're coming from? The taxpayers and you folks, all of you. That's all I want to say.
Is there any other discussion on the article?
George Willen, 42 Shannon Drive. Just a point of clarification on Mr. Glennon's statement in the sense of the amount of money here, $3.7 million, is enough on its own to do what we have to do without those other funding mechanisms. Thank you.
The answer to that is yes. The bond is for the full amount. If we were to receive any money from the state, it would obviously reduce the cost to the ratepayers.
Just want to clarify that.
And to be clear, I'm not on the water system. This doesn't impact me. I think this is the right thing to do for the people in Newmarket that are on the water system. I think we have to ensure that they have clean water to drink.
Having been part of this discussion as part of the planning board, I agree with you.
Is there any other discussion on the article? Sir.
Chet Jablonski, 30 Bay Road. $77 for the rate users per year to pay off the bond. Hard cost, what's the soft cost, the operating cost per year?
I think Sean can address it, but I believe it's about $60,000 a year. It doesn't require any additional personnel.
The cost is $66,000 a year, but that's operating at a 12-hour day So we'd be operating roughly 2/3 of that, so.
Mr. Fillion.
Yeah, one more comment, I guess the last one comment, is I agree that we need this well. I just don't agree that it needs the treatment that they're proposing for it. If you look at this well, it's basically off Ash Swamp Road, and the aquifer is directly under Hamel Farm Drive that has 20 wells in the ground now, and there's probably another 20 wells just surrounding this area, right over this aquifer that we are drawing from. When they started the pump test for the McIntosh well, happen to know the Abbott well, which is 2,250 feet away from it, immediately when they started pumping the McIntosh well, the Abbott well started dropping, and within a day it dropped 70 feet, while the McIntosh well went down a little more than that. But this clearly shows that they are, the Hamel Farm subdivision, which I put in 10 wells in the past 20 years, is directly over the same aquifer that we are drawing from. And there is probably 100 people in this town, in that area, that are drinking that water every day, and have been drinking it for over 20 years. And they have had no complaints whatsoever about the quality of the drinking water. You can ask anybody. There's 3 other subdivisions out off Ash Swamp Road that are directly over this aquifer. And my question is, how can you have 40 wells with different people drinking out of the same aquifer and having no problems with the taste of the water? And they've been drinking this water I've been drinking it for 50 years. But the fact that, not that I live there, but my sons live there and other people that do live there, and some of them will tell you that this water is better than town water. Now, how can you have this water out of the same, and there was 13 wells in that subdivision that they put these piezometers to, and immediately when they started pumping the McIntosh well, all 15 or 13 of these wells started dropping, and as soon as they stopped pumping, the water came back up to their original levels. How can you justify that 100 people are drinking water out of this aquifer every day and say that here's good water, it's been tasty, good water, and the town puts one well in and it has to be treated? No one has compared the nutrients in the McIntosh well versus the other 15, 20 wells in the subdivision to see if the chemicals and whatever are the same, but it just doesn't make sense to me that if everyone else, 100 people that are drinking this water every day out of this aquifer and have no complaints and have had no complaints in the last 20 years or 30 years, and here we put one well in, and wow, it's got to be treated because it's not drinkable. The comments from the state and all these others were before the long-range pump testing, and actually the pump testing that was done for the 35 days did not stabilize these wells. So what the final composition of minerals in this water is not known. And I agree that they're saying, well, they will check this before they spend this amount of money that they're proposing, but it's the comments at the meetings I was to with the engineers and whatever, saying, well, this water isn't as good as the Seward and Bennett well waters, and probably isn't, but they want to spend this money to try to make it as good as the Sewell and Bennett well waters. And the question is this necessary? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other discussion on this article?
Drew Kefeber, 50 Elm Street. I am on the town water. I am one of the budget committee members that supported this article. My reasons are pretty simple. I truly believe that we as a community need an independent source of water. This provides that. It provides it in a means that is the most cost-effective way we've found in the last 10 years. I don't see us finding a more cost-effective way next year or any time in the short-term future. So if you think we need an additional water supply, I would encourage you to vote for this. Some of the budget committee, including myself, would hope that we don't have to spend all of this money. However, if we have to, at least we have another water supply. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this article?
John Bentley, 14 Grant Road. I don't know if the chair or if Craig or someone can. At one point, we heard that we were close to dangerous levels for firefighting during one of the drought years a couple years back. Is that a? Do we recall what that was? Remember the discussion? I don't know who brought it up, if it was one of the people we had in, if it came from you, Sean, or who. But I remember something that during one of the drought years, there was question that we were even question if we would have enough for fires if there was a drought plus some serious fires.
Well, back in 2005, the main reason we adopted our water conservation plan, which basically restricts use according to well levels and other things, it restricted use so that we could make sure the tank would stay full, so that we would have adequate fire fighting and adequate water for the residents. Because our wells right now supply about 490 gallons a minute, and we have limited storage up on Great Hill, which if we have a fire, you know, if it doesn't take much math to realize if the fire department's pulling 1,000 to 2,000 gallons a minute, the tank's going to empty pretty quickly, and there's not the wells just can't keep up. And the other thing is that right now we do get complaints on our water quality, especially down on dead ends such as Maple Crest down, and also down on 108 towards the golf course, because we can't flush. We don't have enough water to flush the hydrants, which would improve water quality for the town residents.
Sir.
Peyton Carr on Bay Road. I think Mr. Fillion's bringing up a very valid issue. The obvious thing to me would seem to be to take the tests the water from the wells that are drawing from the same source and have them analyzed and see how they compare to the test from the McLaren well. And rather than just because people haven't complained, I wouldn't say that's a good way of telling whether the water is good or not. But I don't think it's that expensive if you can just draw the water out of the tap and test it.
Any more discussion on this article? Seeing no more discussion, we'll put this on the ballot as read. Article 3, operating budget. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate as a gross operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein totaling $9,649,110. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $9,593,011, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town of Newmarket or by law, or the town council may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of revised operating budget only. A majority vote of this was required. It was recommended by the town council by a vote of 6-0, recommended by the budget committee by a vote of 7-2. Is there any discussion on Article 3? Sir, Mr. Porterado.
At Porterada, Exeter Road, Newmarket. I understand that the town is going to, what, be $200,000 short because of the state adding the pension fund wholly on us, on taxes? Is this why you...
Is that true?
Did you like...
Can you say that again, sir?
Well, first of all, I went to the school one, there's $325,000. They're going to lay people off. We get $200,000. Are we going to lay people off to cut that out, balance it? Or we stick it into our budget somewhere?
Will the town administrator answer that question?
I think that what we have to do is, as it relates to the additional cost for the retirement system that may be imposed upon the town or the school, is to see how the budget comes out at the end. If you have been following the actions of the legislature, both the Senate and the House have different versions of the budgets that they have passed as it relates to the retirement system, contributions, employer contributions, in addition to the employee. So there's still a long ways to go on that. And there are, on the town side, if the governor's budget was to pass, we would be looking at close to $200,000 of additional cost for the employer side of the ledger. So that's what we're watching for at this point. We think that the budget that we have at the present time is one that was adequate for the community, that we don't have to take any actions. If we do, then at that point, if it's passed, obviously the council and myself will sit down and see where we will have to take some kind of action to ensure that the budget that we're proposed would meet the mandates that we have. And however that may be and what would happen, we discuss that in full and lay that out in front of the voters.
Mr. Porterado, there is one huge difference between what the school has to do and what we have to do. The school, if they decide to lay people off, by contract, they have to notify their employees by, I believe it's April 15th. The town side, we can wait to see what the budget is passed by the state legislature, and then we can take action at that point. We're not bound by the same requirements the school are. That's why the school acted as quickly as they did, not knowing what the final outcome is going to be. They had to act like that to be able to cut their budget if they have to.
Well, anyway, in not many more years, I'll be coming here and asking about the budget, so I'm going to make one fact clear. I go every year to and get the payroll, the town. When you people go through your budget, do you go in there and get all the paperwork and see what everybody makes?
I can't speak for everybody else, but I didn't know.
Because for the simple reason that...
It's in the budget, but I don't go and look name by name for who makes what.
Because I always say that, even with the 9 million something or whatever it was, that I still say it's a little too high. I mean, I'm not going to say, well, cut it down, this and that, but I'm just trying to make a fact clear that if I spend a lot of time looking at the payroll, and I see some questionable, I talked to you about it.
Yep.
You never came back to me.
Yep. No, I got information. We talked.
Well,
And the information is still being looked at because you gave me additional information.
That's right.
That they're trying to research about classifications. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm going to say something that probably not, I'm not trying to go against the employees, but that's called with padding the pension. That's been talked around all the states and everywhere else. That's why I took all the facts out and everything else and showed you some things on it.
Yep.
And I just thought I'd bring that up because I think that in the future, whoever's going to be on the council, they better take a good look at some of the payroll that's on there, because when somebody in that employees are going to retire at $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 plus health benefits, this state will not be able to hold on to that kind of a budget. You know that as well as I do.
And that's part of what the state legislature is looking at. They're looking at changing what is counted towards your retirement.
Yeah, I hope to see the change before it's too late.
Well, I mean, that's up to the legislature.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other discussion on this article? Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go to the ballot as read. Article 4, establish a sidewalk capital reserve fund. To see if the town will vote to establish a sidewalk capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35:1 for the purpose of implementing a sidewalk construction and reconstruction program and to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be placed in this fund and to appoint the town council as agents to expend from the fund. A majority vote is required. It's recommended by the town council by a vote of 6-0, recommended by the budget committee by a vote of 6-3. Is there any discussion on this issue? Real quick, to start discussion, we're going to have the chairman of the town council.
Yeah, just for people that don't know, this is on, and as a warrant article due to a study that was done by the Highway Safety Committee that identified areas in town that needed sidewalks or needed serious sidewalk upgrades or repairs. Rather than budget it every year, which is what happens now, is we budget money to fix sidewalks. We want to start setting money aside so we can, if we need to add sidewalks. One area in town that's been talked about a lot is down by the cemetery on Elm Street. There's a stretch of probably half a mile that's missing a sidewalk. So if this were to pass, this would start allowing us to set aside funds to take care of our sidewalks and to add some sidewalks in areas that we need them.
Robert Madej from Shanda Drive. Excuse me for just a moment. I'd like to just back up a minute, and I want to make a motion to limit reconsideration on the warrant articles that we have just passed. And I'd like to ask a second from somebody.
There's a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded by Mr. Hart. Any discussion on the motion to limit reconsideration?
What does that mean?
My proposal to limit reconsideration on the warrant articles we have previously discussed is to terminate any further discussion on these warrant articles tonight so that we don't have to waste time going back over them again. The motion to limit reconsideration is allowed in state statute, and it was put there so that as people leave the auditorium throughout the night, with the limited people that remain, they don't go back and reconsider a warrant article and change the vote on the warrant article in a different way.
That is correct. So if the motion that is on the floor right now and has been seconded will not allow reconsideration on Articles 1 through 3 up to this point. Is there any discussion on the motion to restrict reconsideration? If not, we'll have a voice vote. That's English. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That would take us back to the warrant article on the sidewalks. And while I commend the Budget Committee for bringing this forward and the Town Council for their consideration, I understand the safety implications involved with sidewalks and all, but I have to apologize to your efforts that you've put forward. This is just not the time, just not the year to put away extra funds. And I'm going to make a motion to move this warrant article dollar amount to zero. By zeroing out the dollar amount, it's my intent that the Budget Committee or the Town Council does not spend any money in this area. If it was to go down to $1, it would then allow you still to take efforts in this one direction. My motion is to move to $0 on this warrant article.
Is there a second to the motion on the floor is to change the dollar amount in this warrant article to $0. Is there a second? There is a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Hart.
I would like to see if we would ask the attorney for clarification. Mr. Madej was suggesting that if this is zeroed out, the council can't spend any money on sidewalks, which I don't think is accurate. I think if it was zeroed out, it would be saying that they can't put any money in the sidewalk, into the sidewalk capital reserve fund. If it, okay. So to clarify, if the town has money already set aside or in the operating budget for sidewalk repair and improvements, whether or not this article passes or does not, with or without money, they could still spend the money in the budget or in other funds that are allowed. I would suggest that maybe you consider making it $1 because I think you're not saying we don't need the reserve fund, you're saying you don't want to put $50,000 in it. And I think you can't create a reserve fund with $0. You have to put at least $1 in it. So I'd respectfully suggest consideration of revising your motion to be $1 if you want to put forward that.
Mr. Hart, I appreciate your suggestion to revise my motion. However, again, during this time and with the deficit that we might see coming from the state, just trying to pull back resources here, I am not going to revise my motion to $1. It is my intent that there not be any money set aside into a capital reserve fund for sidewalks this year. I'm sorry, I just can't see it go there.
Is there any other discussion? Mr. Bentley?
Two things. Question first. The question is there already money set for sidewalk other than this? What he was just speaking of?
There's budget money.
Yeah, there's money in the budget for sidewalks that we have built into it, but there is no sidewalk capital reserve fund, which is what we sought to create with this warrant article.
Okay, one of the other meetings, we had a lot of people come up in support of it that said they appreciated the new sidewalks and walked on them, and I believe, and maybe Mr. Mulaski, if I'm wrong, can tell me, I think the safety part of it's a concern of mine. It's supposed to be 6 inches, I believe, and some of them were actually flush. Some were at 3 inches, some were at 1 inch, and some of the sidewalks are flush. So I learned, I didn't know why we had sidewalks other than to walk on them, but these 6-inch protectors help, so if a car goes off the road, it doesn't hit, the school children walking to school, or the folks walking to the library, or walking where they're walking from. So when that was explained to us, it really hit home to me that it's part of the reason of that 6-inch, and now I believe they're granite, is to protect a car from going up over the curb and hitting people. So I certainly understand the trying to be fiscally responsible. The safety part of it really, I have 3 children that walk on them, and I know a lot of townsfolk walk and run on them daily. So anyway, just my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Fillion, then Ms. Ryan.
I'm Leo Fillion. I'm chairman of the Capital Improvement Program Committee and have been for the last 4 years and been on it. By establishing a sidewalk capital reserve fund, what you would be doing is setting up a fund, and in future years, the Capital Improvement Program Committee would look at this fund as well as all the other capital reserve funds that the town has had, and the Capital Improvement Program Committee then weighs all the capital improvement requests for the year and tries to make a determination as to how much money they feel would be available to go into all these various capital reserve funds. If this went to zero, the Capital Improvement Program Committee would not be considering whether they would be recommending sidewalk improvements in future years. If this was passed with a $1 amount, then next year, when the Capital Improvement Program Committee is appointed by the planning board's budget committee, town council, whatever, they would be looking at sidewalks as well as 8 or 10 other capital reserve funds that we look at each year and try to determine what we feel is how much money we feel should be spent. If this year, I think we recommended $465,000 for various capital reserve funds. Last year, we thought it was a tough year. We probably only had $380,000. In some years, we actually, when we were flush a few years ago, we were recommending $600,000 in various capital reserve funds. So I personally would prefer to see a $1 amount here, and this would establish the capital reserve fund, and in future years, the Capital Improvement Program Committee, whoever they would be, there's 7 members on it, and their job is to feel how much money they feel should be put into these capital reserve accounts, and they make recommendations to the town council and to the budget committee. the budget, they don't have to, they're only advisory, the Capital Improvement Program Committee is only advisory. The town council can change the amount, and so can the budget committee change the amount. Like tonight, they could change what we have recommended. But that's why I personally would rather see this item go to $1 rather than 0. Thank you.
Ms. Ryan?
I defer to Mr. Fillion. Thank you.
Sir?
William Foster, 11 Langs Lane. I guess my question is if the original article was to stand, was the $50,000 going to be spent right away? Or was this to establish a fund?
No, this is to establish a fund.
Then I guess my question is, why would we double dip? Why didn't we take money out of the operating budget right now, establish a fund out of that money, require you to be the agents, and then use that money when we see deemed necessary?
Because right now in the budget, there are some sidewalks that need to be fixed right now. Specifically in this coming year's budget, I believe we have money set aside to do the sidewalks in front of the high school.
But if you established this fund, would you not be able to still expend that money now anyways? So basically, you're asking for us to, one, take money and put it into the budget, operating budget, which I'm going back on, sorry.
Yes.
And spend it now, and establish a fund for money. So it kind of sounds like you're hitting us up from both sides, instead of just using that budget money that's already in there. And I understand it's for the establishment of the fund.
Right.
But if you were to put that in the fund, you don't spend all the money, you have a little bit of balance, then maybe next year, when the state still isn't going to give any money, we can take some of our own and dump it in there when we can. Instead of just...
I understand what you're saying, absolutely. And it is, there's $50,000 in the budget this year. The idea, though, is for this to be long-term planning and for additional sidewalks that the Highway Safety Committee and deems that we are necessary. The operating budget, the intention there is to do routine maintenance. Unfortunately, some of the sidewalks in town have gotten to the point where routine maintenance is no longer possible.
So with establishing the fund, you would not be able to do routine maintenance out of that fund? Would it take votes to spend that money, or would you be the agents of that fund and you could spend it when needed?
We'd be the agents of it. The intent would not be to use it for routine maintenance. It says for construction and reconstruction. Reconstruction is more than just routine maintenance.
Thank you.
So that's a
I see
distinction.
Councilman Bentley's kids walking to and from school when the weather's nice, and that sidewalk going from the elementary school to the high school, it's maybe an inch off the ground, so I'm in support. I was just kind of clarifying what it was. Thank you.
Sir.
Russ Simon, is there a general capital reserve fund? Forget all the specific capital reserve funds we have for 15 pet projects. There's no general capital reserve? So the only way that the town council can decide to spend money on capital improvements or refurbishment is to create a new capital-specific reserve fund? That sounds reasonably absurd to me.
The difference between a capital reserve fund and fund in the operating budget is if it's in the operating budget, you don't spend it, it goes away. If you have it in the capital reserve fund, it can be carried over from year to year to year.
I understand that, Leo. My question is, we don't have a general capital reserve to protect the assets of Newmarket. Every time we decide that there's a new asset that needs to be reserved against for possible replacement or improvement, we create a separate fund for that, so we end up with 20 or 30 different funds that have to be managed?
Well, we have a CIP, which is...
It's a yes or no
designed
question. Either we have a general capital reserve fund, or we don't.
The answer is no.
We do not have one.
Okay.
Mr. Hart.
I feel it's necessary, Russ, to respond because you need to understand you can't just create a general capital reserve fund. If we did that, we'd be violating state law, and then you'd be saying, what are you going to spend it on? So this is purposefully saying, let's create the fund for this purpose. I do think we should probably vote on the amendment, and then if we have more discussion on the general article, we can go back to that.
Is there any more discussion on the amendment? Now, what we're discussing right now is the motion to amend Article 4 to say $0. Is there any discussion on that specific portion of this?
I'd like to speak against the amendment. I helped write the report that the town council got from my name is Bob Daigle. And right now, the town's looking at about, if I remember correctly, $3,750,000 in needs for sidewalks. We're not going to do that. We're not going to put a big dent in it at $50,000 or $60,000 a year. One of the things that the Highway and Public Safety Committee did was get the school interested and through the planning department, start a Safe Routes program where there's matching grants and there's grants available for that. We need this capital reserve account so that if the applications for grants for the Safe Routes program does come about, we have a pool of money to extend that. We've got about $1,750,000 in new construction that's needed to reinforce the town's core system, and we need about the same amount in rehab. So $50,000 isn't going to put a big dent in it, and my grandchildren at that rate are never going to be able to see all the sidewalks that need attention. I think it would be prudent to set up the capital reserve account. Thank you.
Before you go back, I just want to see if anyone else has an opportunity to speak. Anyone else want to speak on the motion to move the dollar value on Article 4 to $0?
Thank you. So I just really want to reiterate that, I'm not against this, this capital reserve fund. I understand the capital reserve fund. I understand the benefits that it has for the town over the long run, and that it helps smooth out our taxes over the long run. I understand the safety implications of sidewalks, and I know that, town improvements, I'm all for town improvements. I'm behind this town 100%. I'm just sorry, I'm asking the voters that are here present tonight if they understand maybe not if they understand, but do they see what's happening in the legislation, that funds are being withdrawn. Our school system, our school budget is going under drastic cuts right now. And it's going to happen. We're taking these cuts in our school. We're going to have to take cuts in the town probably. I understand, it's set in stone yet, but Jesus, it's coming. So maybe next year, come back to us when my legislators and my government officials tell me it's going to be a brighter day next year, but not this year, please. I'm just asking for support from the members here tonight to make this $0 this year. Let's go for it next year. Thanks.
Any more discussion on the amendment? If not, we will vote on the amendment. We'll use voice vote. All those in favor of amending Article 4 to read $0, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
In my opinion, the ayes have it.
Yeah.
Do we now need to vote on, I know I should know this. Do we have to step back and vote on the entire thing? Because that was just the amendment. Yes, we do. Right, we continue discussion, right. So Article 4 now reads, well, it reads exactly as it reads there, except $0. Is there any more discussion on Article 4 as it is now written?
Robert, today I'd like to limit
Sir, could you-
consideration on motions taken today.
Point of inquiry, how can we do that when we haven't finished discussion on the article yet?
Yeah.
We just took a vote on the motion.
On the amendment to the article.
Any more discussion on Article 4 as currently written?
I do have a question.
Yes.
I believe the attorney was trying to determine if the article would still establish the reserve fund, whether it's $1 or $0. Has that possible to know the answer tonight?
Yes, I was waiting, sorry, for Justin Richardson again. I was waiting for leave to respond. I don't think that the impact wouldn't be greater than $1. The difference would be, under one scenario, you'd have no money in the fund, and the other you'd have $1 in the fund, but you'd still have established the fund, and that, the impact would be whether or not you wouldn't have to vote to establish it in a subsequent year.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Sharples.
Rochelle Sharples, 10 Lamprey River Park. I don't know if this would health situation. I know a couple of years ago, we had some major confusion on a veterans vote where we made the article read 2C and left it at that. Does this fall under that? No?
You can no longer, the governor signed into law, you can no longer use 2C.
Good, because that was a very confusing thing that day, so I'm glad he did that.
Just this
Thank
February.
you.
It's fresh off the presses. Any other discussion on Article 4? If not, we will now vote on Article 4, which now reads, establish a sidewalk capital reserve fund. To see if the town will vote to establish a sidewalk capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35:1 for the purpose of implementing a sidewalk construction and reconstruction program, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $0 to be placed in this fund, and to appoint the town council as agents to expend from the fund. All those in favor of Article 4 as it currently reads, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
The ayes have it. Article 5, establish a downtown TIF capital reserve fund. To see if the town will vote to establish a downtown TIF capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35:1 for the purpose of downtown TIF district expenses, and to appropriate the sum of $1,056,117 from the downtown TIF fund balance to be placed in this fund, and to appoint the town council as agents to expend from the fund. Majority vote is required, recommended by the town council by a vote of 6-0, recommended by the budget committee by a vote of 7-0. The chairman of the town council will explain.
All right, to explain this article, we already have the money set aside. We're trying to wind down the downtown TIF. Legally in New Hampshire, we can't pay the bond off early, so we have to set the money aside. So this allows us to set the money aside so we can pay the yearly amount left on the bond. So it's basically an accounting tool to allow us to wind down the downtown TIF.
Yes, we can.
Is there any discussion on Article 5?
You can't shut it down, but you can pay. No, you have to pay.
Going once. Going twice. Article 5 goes into the ballot as read. Now we're having a deliberative session. We're having a good time up here. All right, let's do this. Article 6, hydraulic and hydrologic modeling study, Ash Swamp Road. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to conduct a preliminary study to evaluate the potential impacts of raising the road elevation for a section of Ash Swamp Road that has been prone to flooding. A majority vote for this article is required. It was recommended by the town council by a vote of 6-0, not recommended by the budget committee by a vote of 7-1. Does anyone on the council or the budget committee want to explain the discrepancy or the article itself?
I'll speak to the genesis of this. And Leo Fillion did point out some confusion in this. The genesis of this was that after we had the downtown flooding, specifically the flooding in the bowl a few years ago, the town hired Underwood engineers to do a hydraulic study to see if there were ways to improve the drainage down there to prevent that from happening again. To make a long story short, they did a study which basically they had some recommendations that, if implemented, would help in a small storm. In the types of storms we've had in the past few years, their recommendations wouldn't help. It became apparent that the problem with the bowl area started with water flooding down on Ash Swamp Road. So the intent of this is actually to do a hydraulic study of the Ash Swamp drainage area to see if there are ways to improve it. The warrant reads now about raising the road, which I think is one of the alternatives. I don't think the warrant should have been written the way it was, so after the discussion, if it goes forward, I think I'll offer a motion to change the wording, but that's where the town council is coming from. I think we owe it to the people who live down the bowl and the businesses downtown to see if there is a way we can prevent future flooding down there. We're never going to know unless we do this study, So, and I think that's what the council's position was, and I know the Budget Committee had certainly a different opinion.
And if the Budget Committee want to...
The Budget Committee's position, I believe, if I remember the various opinions that were provided, indicated that, A, this would not necessarily solve the problem of the downtown. B, the cost of the implementation of the solutions that the study might recommend would be far beyond what the town could actually afford to do. And the simpler solution might be to address the bridge and the Piscassic where a lot of the flooding occurs without just spending money on the whole study. So the committee felt pretty strongly not to support the article. And if there's other, I'm sure the committee members will share their opinion if I misrepresented it.
Mr. Fillion.
Yeah, my concern on this was basically the wording of raising the road elevation. I do think if people who have been around the previous two floods, and I was along Hersey Lane when the water was running across Hersey Lane from the Piscassic River south of the Ash Swamp Road elevation, and the water was running into that area behind the high school. It was over 100 feet wide and 3 to 4 feet deep, and the Piscassic was really running millions of gallons an hour into the bowl area. And the Hersey Lane portion where this was running across is part of an old Class 6 road that the town used to use and had been since washed out. And my concern was that we should rebuild that section of Hersey Lane. 200-300 loads of gravel would raise it up enough to return it to a Class 6 road and could stop the Piscassic from running into the Millbrook area and down eventually into the bowl area. And some people are saying that, well, you're building a dam and we can't build a dam. But basically, I was just saying is let's return Hersey Lane to what it was for the last 200 years when that used to be the main road coming from Exeter to Newmarket before Exeter Road was built. And there's people who are saying, well, we can't do that. We can't repair our Class 6 road, and I have some concerns about it. But the basic, this model, as was said, is that raising the road elevation is not a good reason to do this, but a study of stopping the Piscassic River from feeding right into the bowl area. It feeds in from there, and people who also lived in the town at the last big flood saw the water running across Elm Street just below the railroad tracks. That was going into the swamp and into the bowl area too. In that road, the Elm Street portion of just below the railroad tracks between there and Packers Falls Road should also be raised a few feet to keep that water from running into the bowl area. I guess the Budget Committee just did not see spending $50,000 to look at the potential of raising the road elevation. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on Article 6?
Robert Madej again from Shanda Drive. So I drive Ash Swamp Road every day, and I had to try to drive over that road during the 100-year floods, which have happened quite a few times in the last 100 years. I think during your public session, we talked about 100-year floods and the impact, and I think that it was thrown out that a 100-year flood is defined as a flood of high magnitude that has a probability of occurrence of like 3% in a year. 1% in any given year. So, you know, here we are trying to spend money for an occurrence that might happen 1% of a total year. And again, while I see the benefit, I have to ask again, for 1% chance of it occurring, do I think it's reasonable to spend the money in this climate again? You know, and I'm sorry to have to bring that up again, but again, it's in the news, and I put it out again for the people here that are here voting. I personally believe that this deliberative session is more powerful than the second session, which is where we vote on it. As you will find out, the warrant article we discussed previously where we zeroed it out, if you think about it, no matter how the vote occurs at the next session, that money isn't going anywhere. So this session has more power, really, than the second session. Again, on this warrant article, I'm going to make a motion to change the dollar amount to $0. Again, my intent is not to ruin the town. Again, it's just for the climate and the atmosphere that we have to exist in this year. Come back next year, maybe, but I'm trying to keep costs down. We're going to be hurting, as a lot of other towns are. That's my motion to change the dollar amount to $0 on this warrant article.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to change Article 6's wording to only alter the dollar amount from $50,000 to $0. Is there discussion? I'm going to ask discussion around the amendment, not on the entire motion in and of itself, or the entire article in and of itself. Is there any discussion around the motion to amend the dollar value down to $0? Seeing no discussion, we'll do a voice vote on the motion to alter Article 6 dollar value from $50,000 down to $0. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. We now will resume debate or deliberation around Article 6. Is there any further discussion on Article 6? Seeing no further discussion, since there was an amendment, we will vote on the entirety of Article 6, which now reads, Hydrologic Modeling Study, Ash Swamp Road. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $0 to conduct a preliminary study to evaluate the potential impacts of raising the road elevation for a section of Ash Swamp Road that has been prone to flooding. All those in favor of Article 6, aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The clerk will put it on the ballot as such. Article 7. Appoint the town council as agents to expend. To see if the town will vote to appoint the town council as agents to expend from the Technology Capital Reserve Fund previously established in May 2006. A majority vote is required. I have the town council, in my notes, had voted on it from 6-0 in favor. I don't have the notes on what the budget committee voted.
The budget committee only votes on articles that have
that's
dollar
it.
values.
No dollar value. That's why. And the chairman of the town council will speak to the article.
This is basically a clerical issue that when the Technology Capital Reserve Fund was established in 2006, it didn't set up the town council to expend the funds. So therefore, we have the funds, but nobody can spend them. So this will, in 2006, when it was set up, there was an oversight, and I believe that Leo Fillion brought it to our attention at a meeting a couple of months ago. So this is an attempt to rectify that oversight so that the funds in the Technology Capital Reserve Fund can be expended, and the town council would be the agents to authorize spending.
Comment?
Mr. Fillion.
Yeah. A little correction there. Basically, the town council can't spend money from this fund. It would have to be appropriated and approved by this meeting here. In other words, the deliberative session had to approve. If they want to spend $40,000 out of this fund, it would have to come to this deliberative session and to be approved by the town. If you make this change, then it will be like most of our other capital reserve funds where the town council's our agent. So the money could be spent out of this fund, but it would require a warrant article each year in order to take money out of this fund. And if this amendment here will allow the town council as agent to expend from this fund. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any further discussion on Article 7?
Point of information, how much
Yes.
is in the fund?
How much is in the fund? Does the town administrator know? Or let's go back, finance.
That's about 40. 60?
He's looking it up. It's riveting to watch a finance guy look up a number in a book.
At the beginning of the year, there was 40,475.
40,475. Thank you, sir. Any further discussion on Article 7? Being none, it will move to the ballot as read. All right, Article 8. We're almost down there. Last two. This is a mouthful. I'm going to take a swig of water beforehand. This is going to be rough. Article 8. Rescind bonding authority for Black Bear TIF. Shall the town vote to rescind the $3,250,000 of bonding authority for the Black Bear Tax Increment Finance District that has been authorized by a 1998 vote of town meeting per NHRSA 162K:1-15 Local Option Tax Increment Finance District as adopted by the Newmarket Town Council in accordance with the Municipal Finance Act, RSA Chapter 33. The purpose of this article is to prohibit the use of any RSA 162K municipal debt to finance the construction of public infrastructure improvements, e.g. roads, sewer, other utilities, etc., within the Black Bear TIF. The exercise of this bonding authority by the town council was expressly conditioned upon the town having secured a firm agreement with a developer sufficient to amortize, pay back, the bonded debt. To date, no bonds have been issued by the town council and no infrastructure improvements have been constructed by the town in the Black Bear TIF since it was established 13 years ago, on 5/6/98. A number of concerning development proposals for the TIF have been discussed. A New Jersey garbage company, a lumber distribution facility with 24/7 heavy truck and rail traffic, and more recently, a trash recycling plant delivering garbage to Newmarket. Given the large number of residents in this in the area of Route 108 and New Road, and considering the nearby proximity of the environmentally sensitive Great Bay, the petitioners believe that taxpayer money should not be used to promote large commercial/industrial development in this area of town. This was submitted by a petition, and a 2/3 majority, correct, is required for this to pass. The reason it's 2/3 is because Chapter 33, Section 33:8-F states that the vote to rescind must pass by the same majority required at the time of the recession vote to adopt a bond or note, which means that because it required 2/3 initially to pass, it requires 2/3 to rescind the authority of the bond. That being said, would one of the petitioners like to address the substance of this?
Bill Cherry, 155 Exeter Road. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you and commend you for devoting your time for being on the town council and the budget committee. I know it takes a lot of time, and there's not enough hours in the day to deal with the issues we have to deal with in the town. I was one of the signatures of this warrant article, along with 100+ other people, for a number of reasons, and I'd like to take a moment to describe a few. The main purpose of this warrant article is to bring the process back to square one and re-engage the Newmarket voters on the planning process and decide what type of development is appropriate for the TIF district. It's been 13 years since the bonding authority was approved, and much has changed. And as we've heard all tonight, the economic picture has changed, our financial commitments to many other things, including this new well, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, the school. Do we really want to spend $3.25 million on something that has as much chance to lose money as it stands to gain? So we need to really go back to square one and rethink this and come up with a game plan. This is not to try to kill the TIF committee or anything reflect against the town council. In reality, if we want to be successful here, we need to do our due diligence first. And the only way to make sure that that happens is to rescind the bond authority and go back to the drawing board. Because we've had 13 years to draw up a game plan, and we haven't done it yet. So the bonding authority should be the carrot that's awarded after the due diligence, and not have the bonding authority drive this process. So, just in a moment on the financials, there seems to be a general consensus that all we need is any development in this district and it's going to make money. And that's not necessarily the case. And this is not a slam dunk by any means because of the access challenges to this site. But for example, if we look at the Boise Cascade development that was proposed 2 years ago in 2009, there was a fiscal assessment done by a consultant, and he came up with some estimates of the infrastructure improvements needed just to gain access to the site. And it was a nominal estimate of doing some roadway improvements at Route 108 intersection and the railway crossing, and to extend the road across the crossing into the new area, as well as extending the water. And that cost was $2.6 million. The annual cost to pay that bond of $2.6 million was $200,000 a year. The estimated annual tax revenue for this fairly sizable development, which was a 100,000 square foot facility, was only $90,000 to $95,000 a year. So we stood to lose $100,000 a year, and this did not include any annual service costs of police, fire, plowing, ambulance. And the consultant did feel that this was a low estimate. It did not include any improvements to the Stanton Drive, Forbes Drive intersection, which is a dangerous intersection in itself as it stands. And I'll let others speak to that in itself, but it's a blind drive to take a left turn into Stanton Drive from Forbes Drive, and that would have to be improved. So it could have easily been over $3 million just to get access to this one development. So, with that, and I understand the counter arguments, and that is if we don't have the bonding authority in place, we will not be able, we'll be at a disadvantage, and we won't be able to react in time to a new proposal, and I disagree. If we have appropriate development that comes before us, the town council has the ability to arrange for a special meeting, town meeting, in a timely fashion and get voter approval. We have done this before, and other towns have done it in the past. And I would think that the town council and any potential developer would want to know if they have the support of the residents behind any proposed development before they enter into financial agreements, rather than finding out later that they don't have the support. And so for all these reasons, I strongly believe we need to rescind the bonding authority, go back to the drawing board, let the Newmarket voters and the people that live in the area to weigh in on the planning process. And if I was a town councilor or TIF committee member, I would want to share this burden of this decision with the Newmarket residents. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other discussion on Article 8?
Bruce Vecto, S. Swampboard, and I believe I was part of this committee 13 years ago. We decided to do this. And any development starts with the first step, and this was it. This hasn't cost us a dime in 13 years, but it's there ready in case something does come up. I'd like to see this stay in place so that we have the tools to work with if a development does become available. It just makes good sense and saves a lot of time and aggravation for everyone. Thank you.
Sir? Y'all can just line up right behind. It'll make it easier.
John Badger, Cushing Road. I'd like a clarification from the petitioners. In this proposed warrant article, it removes the bonding authority of, proposes to remove the bonding authority of $3.25 million. Yet in the next to the last sentence, it states that taxpayer money should not be used. And I think that's probably an incorrect description of what they're trying to do. And if there's a clarification, because if it's taxpayer money, it's any kind of money out of the general fund or whatever, versus their intent is to rescind the bonding authority. So to me, there's a conflict here that needs to be clarified.
If you'd allow me to have one of the petitioners
That's
answer
fine.
his question. No, I'm talking to the two that are in line behind you. If you don't mind waiting, one more person. Thank you, gentlemen. Would one of the petitioners like to, he's asking for a point of clarification on the article, stating that taxpayer money should not be used to promote the remainder of the sentence, but that he's stating that it's a bonding authority, not out of the general fund. Sir.
Gary Levy, Smith Garrison Road, Newmarket. The clarification would be that it would not take away the bonding authority of the town. It would take away the bonding authority of the council in and of itself to do this, and it would put it to a vote of the town in order to get this bonding authority accepted. So if it's going to go forward, the town would call a special meeting, the council. It would then go before the voters of the town, and if the town felt that that was the proper business for this area, and it was going to make sense, and it was going to pay for itself, then they could go ahead and vote for it, and the town could then bond it. Does that answer?
No.
Okay, so what
If I may. Sure. I would suggest a change in wording. Instead of taxpayer money, that the term funds raised under the TIF bonding authority be inserted there.
Are you making a motion, sir?
Yes, I am.
So you're making a motion that to strike the language
taxpayer money,
and turn that into
funds raised under the TIF bonding authority.
Is there a second for the motion to alter the language from taxpayer money to funds raised under the TIF bonding authority? So there is a second on the floor. Is there discussion on this amendment?
Point of clarification. If that was accepted,
So you speak to the mic. I'm just sorry to stop you.
if that motion was accepted, then that would then give the taxpayers of the town the opportunity to vote for this bond.
Depends on if it's passive or not.
If it's passed by the,
No, I'm just trying to clarify the language, because I don't want in 2 or 3 years from now, let me step up here, a project to come along, let's say this passes, and then the town is not allowed to use funds from anywhere else, from the general fund, because it says taxpayer money. It doesn't clarify which money from the taxpayer.
But your motion, the intent of your motion is to tighten the language around
That's correct.
just restricting expenditures from the TIF as opposed to the
Taxpayer money out of the general fund.
Okay.
That's correct. And I think it's an innocuous change, but it makes it much clearer.
So you've already spoken to it once, so I just want to allow anyone else that wants to speak to the amendment. Ms. Quax?
By taking out the taxpayer money,
Would that also eliminate the money that is already in the Black Bear TIF, which I think is close to $100,000? I believe we've, no, actually, it's more than that. I believe since the TIF has been incorporated, that we have put aside in the TIF for Black Bear close to $1 million. Now, would that mean that the money put aside in the Black Bear TIF as it stands now, we would be, by taking that out, we could still use that money to start infrastructure without the townspeople being able to vote on it? So I think that probably leaving taxpayer money in there would.
I'm going to defer to the lawyer because this, I think we're getting into some legalese here that maybe you can add a point of clarification to this, sir.
I'm sorry, I've lost what the question was.
Let me do my best to reiterate it. So the motion on the floor is that the phrase in the second to last line of Article 8 would go from the petitioners believe that taxpayer money should not be used to promote large commercial XYZ to the petitioners believe that funds raised under the TIF should not be used to promote remainder of the sentence.
Excuse me, under the TIF bonding authority.
Under the TIF bonding authority.
I think one of the issues that's being alluded to is it really relates to the nature of this meeting in the vote that is going to be taken in May. And that's really to decide what money the town should budget, should raise, and appropriate. And that's really what's covered in the first sentence, and is a valid question to put to the voters. To the extent you're talking about spending from capital reserve funds, or you're talking about other discretionary questions, what should be built, what shouldn't be built, what's a safety issue, what isn't, you're dealing with things that under the town charter are really the discussion that happens in front of the town council. So what I see in this article is I mean, there is some confusion, as Mr. Badger alluded to. What I see as the operative part of this article from a legal perspective in terms of what this town meeting is called upon to do is the first sentence, and to decide whether or not to rescind the budgeting authority. Everything that comes after that is really just, it can't be anything more than an elaboration of that point in the best sense. In the worst sense, it raises all sorts of legal doubt about whether or not there was authority to control what money could be spent on what, and it does get confusing at that point. Does that answer your question?
But let's make sure Mr. Badger's question is answered, and then we'll come to, well, we've had two people waiting patiently, then Mr. Fillion. Mr. Badger, are you done?
Well, there's a motion.
There's a motion on, the motion on the floor is to alter the phrase taxpayer money to funds raised under the TIF bonding authority. Mr. Fillion, was your point to that discussion?
No, I guess not. No.
Well, we'll get to you once we deal with this motion on the floor, and then more discussion on the motion, sir?
Moderator, did you get a second on that motion?
Yes. Mr. Hart?
On this motion, I think Mr. Badger's comment is appropriate, and I think that what I interpreted from the attorney was that this article, whether it passes or not, cannot affect the existing money the town has collected from the downtown TIF. It can be expended for the purposes of the TIF, whether or not this passes. Right. And that you can't do that through this article. You can't restrict the whatever $1 million or less that we have for the Black Bear TIF. The council still retains the authority to expend that, with or without this article. Because this is just about the bonding. So I think the language change he's suggesting makes sense. Anyway.
So is there any more discussion on the changing of the language? Sir.
Just a point of clarification. So in the event that that motion is passed, the bonding authority if a business comes to the town that the town decides that it wants to move forward with, that bonding authority would still come back, if this passes, to the people of the community, the taxpayers of Newmarket, and not made by the town council in and of itself.
As I understand it, the $1 million that is already, or whatever the exact amount that is already in the TIF, the 340,000? The 340,000 that is already in the TIF is at the discretion of the town council, but
Okay.
they would not be allowed to appropriate any more funds into the TIF bond.
And if there were more funds to be allocated because it was necessary for the infrastructure improvements, that bonding authority would have to go to the people based on this warrant article if it passes. Is that
Well, but if the bonding authority is rescinded, then any further bonding authority would require
the town vote?
this.
That's what I'm asking. Okay.
Mr. Fillion.
Clarifying your statement, I don't agree. In future money that is in this TIF will continue to accumulate like has been done in the past. By restricting this bonding authority does not abolish the TIF. The TIF will continue as it has in the past, and excess money that's been collected will continue going into
Yes,
this
that,
TIF.
yeah, I'm sorry if it
Yeah,
came across
okay.
as not meaning that.
It's very similar to pay as you go, rather than bond it. And if you're going to bond it, we want it to come back to the people. Well, we, the petitioners, want it to come back to the people.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing no further discussion, the amendment is to alter the phrase taxpayer money in the second to last line to funds raised under the TIF bonding authority. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Figure that one out.
We are going to go to a hand vote. Just to make sure that I think some people walked in before or after the ground rules were set. If you are a non-voter, please ensure you are against the back wall. If you are a voter, make sure that you are forward of the back wall. The ballot clerks will be counting. If you are in favor of the motion to change the phrase taxpayer money to funds raised under the TIF bonding authority, please raise your hand.
All right, I'll go. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It does make sense.
It's just to amend the
Amend,
words
yeah,
taxpayer
just to amend
money
it.
to funds raised.
Would you repeat that again, please, Mr. Moderator?
If you are in favor of the motion to amend the bonding authority, amend the article, excuse me.
Dana, is your hand
No,
up?
it's down. I'm scratching.
Are you right? Are you good, clerks? Are you good on the right?
I counted them, and Mr. Badger. There was 12 in favor.
All right, put your hands down. Woo! It's rough. It's a workout. All right. It's like church. Come up, get something to eat, go back and take a knee. If you are not in favor of altering the language to say from taxpayer money to fund raised under the TIF bonding authority, raise your hand now.
Oh, you didn't.
No, I was scratching.
I got you. Council
21.
five.
21 total? My section, 19 and 21.
Mine was, oh, I already counted. No, 5 no's. Oh, you counted them? Okay.
Excuse me, point of order, seeing how there's such a discrepancy, could we, like the undecided voters, could we please have a secret ballot?
You can't have a secret ballot unless it happens before the vote. Not my call, the government of New Hampshire. The motion carries by a vote of 56 to 42. Now, if the motion carried by a vote of 56 to 42. Now, if someone, I'm just going to remind everyone of their procedural rights. If someone wants to have, well, no, it's outside of the recount vote, so you can't do a recount. It's not within the 10%. So now we're going to go back to discussion about the article in and of itself.
If I may finish?
Go ahead, sir.
I have another amendment to propose.
I'm sorry. If I have to go back to my initial statement, you already had a chance your chance to speak was to make the motion.
Okay.
So I'm going to let others have a chance to speak, and then back to the original line. Here we go.
Arlen Chaffee, 2 Packers Falls Road. I'm here as the president of the Newmarket Community Development Corporation, which was an original supporter of both TIF districts, both in the downtown and Black Bear. And on behalf of the consensus of the board of directors with the Newmarket Community Development Corporation, which actually met last night, we are here in opposition to rescission of the bonding authority. And generally, the purpose of our opposition is this. We see the TIF district and bonding authority as a tool. So if a tool has been unused or misused, that's one situation. But to remove the tool from the kit, absent that, is inappropriate. So our position is, yes, it's been 13 years. And nothing has seemingly developed from it. But having that tool in the toolkit is very useful if you have a bona fide developer in hand. So the first situation is to find out what is a qualified developer out there. Is that a developable property? But if you don't have the bonding authority in place and you do go out looking for a developer, you're a bit hamstrung on a timing situation, because developers typically don't wait for voting cycles to make their business decisions. And that was the wisdom behind the implementing the TIF districts in the first place. And I would agree, 13 years seemingly has gone by in a blink of an eye. NCDC's been otherwise occupied, but after we lift our heads up and find out, was it really 1998 that we voted this in? So yes, it's been a long time, but have we appropriately looked at the development prospects for that parcel? I don't agree we have. And I think it's incumbent upon the council and it's incumbent upon the TIF committee to do their due diligence and find out, is this a developable piece of property, and then try to find willing developers that will go in there. But without the bonding authority in place, you're really going to be chasing your tail. It's going to be a very hard thing. And we found that the downtown TIF district was very instrumental in the success of the development of the downtown mills. So, I can see where emotionally, it might get charged as far as, nothing's been done in 13 years. There's been a couple at-bats, but I think the process itself needs to be tightened, and the fact that people are concerned enough about it to put a warrant article forward and get petition signatures might be a bit of a wake-up call. But our belief as the NCDC is keep that tool in the toolkit for the time being. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Madey, waiting patiently.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I stand behind everything that Arlen Chafee just said. I'd like to add a little bit more. That again, the TIF was set up as an incentive for developers to come into town to help build our infrastructure up in the town, to help us out as taxpayers, to maybe bring some money into the town in other ways to help us on our taxes. It was a benefit. It was to be a benefit of the town residents. And as Arlen clearly pointed out, that the ability for the town council to issue bonds as an incentive to a business to come in to help them with infrastructure changes could help invite businesses into the town. By taking it away, you eliminate the ability of the town council to provide those incentives to a business. And to say that, oh, we'll take them away and we'll call a special town meeting to make those incentives, well, a town meeting comes at an expense. I don't really know what the total expense is, but I do know it's not free of charge. It has to be set out to the public ahead of time and held. It's a big expense to the town to do that. So it's really not, and also, I don't know if you want everybody in the town arguing over who's going to come in as a business or not. That's already been established through the planning board that the town has already elected and put in place. So we've asked the planning board to come up with the decision of what is a good business to come into town, what isn't, and how to handle that kind of thing. So if something has not been established in the last 13 years, well, in my opinion, shame on the planning board. I mean, look what Pease Development has done for Pease in the last 13 years, and nothing's been done in Newmarket? Well, you guys answer that. Also, for businesses that come into the town, it's not the, the bond talks about some businesses that may not be attractive. Again, that's the control of the planning board. And if you have ideas that the planning board is not moving in the direction that you wish to see development in your business area, you don't go and remove funding as an incentive. Go to the planning board and bring your opinion to the planning board and have them hear your words and vote maybe in your favor. So I had difficulty with this warrant article. You guys heard me zero out some others. This is a very strong warrant article, and it's very difficult to try to change it with an amendment. My first inclination was to insert the word "not" in the front to negate the warrant article. But the town of Exeter just did that in one of their last deliberative sessions, and that ended up in litigation. Now, however, I believe that litigation will fall out in favor of the town that voted to rescind that warrant article, because the intent of the voters at that time was to rescind the warrant article, regardless of how the wording turned out to be. But I'm not going to recommend that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion to change the dollar amount to zero, but in a specific way, and I think it'll work. And again, I'm asking for support here because I believe that we need development here in the town, and I want the people of this meeting to stand behind that. I'd like the warrant article to read, "Shall the town vote to rescind $0 of bonding authority?" The remainder of it to stay the same.
There's a motion on the floor to reword the first section of Article 8, the first phrase, to say, "Shall the town vote to rescind $0 of the bonding authority?"
That's correct.
Is there a second? There is a second. Discussion on the amendment. And just so everyone knows that I've received signatures of 5 voters present to have this vote when it's eventually conducted in secret ballot. So discussion on the amendment. Sir.
To me, this is changing the purpose of this warrant article, which I understand the latest rules of the legislature was that you cannot change the purpose of a warrant article. Right. This is basically changing it from yes to no, and to me, I would have to ask legal counsel whether this is actually appropriate due to the latest legislature.
Understood, Mr. Fillion. Sir, what is your opinion? Does that change or in light of the latest legislation?
I'll read the statute so all can have it. It was passed, I believe, or signed by the governor on February 1st. And it says that no warrant article shall be amended to eliminate the subject matter of the article. And just looking at that, it's my opinion that this would not eliminate the subject matter of the article. And so I think that would be a valid amendment. But with the proviso that this is not a provision that's been tested or interpreted by any court that I'm aware of.
So the amendment stands to reword the dollar amount in Article 8 from $3,250,000 to $0. Is there any further discussion?
May I elaborate on that?
Yeah, while he's blocking that.
I'm sorry, I should have flipped the page because there really is actually further information in there. It says an amendment that changes the dollar amount of an appropriation in a warrant article shall not be deemed to violate this subparagraph. Now, this is not an appropriation article, but that certainly suggests that changing the amount in a warrant article is a permissible amendment.
George Willant, 42 Shannon Drive, and while I don't agree with the overall warrant article, but just on this amendment, I don't agree with the amendment. And maybe for a very simplistic reason. There are a lot of voters coming in on May, and I think this is just going to make it confusing. I would think that we should keep the warrant article, actually I have another amendment to this warrant article, that once this one goes through,
One at a time,
I'll make a suggestion. I'll step back and do that later. But I think it just makes it very confusing. What these petitioners want to do is put it forth to the voters to keep the bonding authority or not. I think at this point, in respect to Mr. Madej, we should make the arguments here, as people have been doing, about what our opinion is. My opinion is that we should keep that bonding authority. So I'm not for the warrant article, just so we have that on record. And therefore, but more importantly on this amendment, I think we're confusing ourselves and the voters. Keep it to what it is and let the voters say yes or no.
Thank you, sir. It takes two-thirds to pass in the vote, not in amendments to the vote. Sir, you? No, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Gary Levy.
Gary Levy, we'll have you, then Mr. Fillion.
I have a statement to read and then just address a couple of issues. My name is Gary Levy, and I live on Smith Garrison Road in Newmarket. I am one of the makers of the warrant article before us tonight.
Sir, is that on the amendment or is that on the whole warrant article?
It's on the amendment and the whole warrant article. I'm against the amendment, and I want to read a statement regarding the entire purpose of the warrant article and why I'm against the amendment.
As long as you couch it in terms that show why it's directly related to the amendment, because we don't want to have this turn into a whole discussion about the entire warrant article. We want to take care of the amendment first, then go back to the warrant article. So if you can couch it in terms of the amendment, all for it. Otherwise, we'll wait until post the amendment, then you can make your statement.
So just so I'm clear, the amendment is to change it to $0.
Yes.
Okay, so it would read, shall the town vote to rescind the $3,250,000, so it would vote to rescind 0. So essentially putting back the $3,250,000. Leaving it there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I would be opposed to that amendment for a variety of reasons. Number one, there were a couple of comments made regarding the toolbox and taking away the ability for the town to put it to a town vote, and Mr. Matei, I believe, asked how much it would cost, et cetera. I actually anticipated that question, so I got a legal opinion, as to what that would require, and I have it here if people would like to look at it. They can take a look if they'd like, but it's about $1,000 to $1,500 to go to an attorney, and the attorney pretty much said that you've requested my opinion about whether authorization could be obtained to hold a special town meeting to ask voters to appropriate money to construct necessary roadway utility infrastructure to support the location of this business in the TIF. The question assumes that a developer has approached the town of Newmarket and seeks to locate a terrific business in the Black Bear TIF area, a business which offers employment opportunities for residents and the expansion of the town's tax base. If the town learns of this development opportunity, the business owners and the business owners can't wait until the next town meeting. There's a 5-prong test which he felt that the town would clearly pass. It can be done within a couple of 3 weeks period. And if any business was going to come to this town, it would certainly be more than a couple of 3 weeks to go through the planning process, et cetera. So as far as not having the ability to put it to a vote of the citizens, that doesn't really pass muster. As far as the planning board applying the law, you know, and if we don't like this, you know, you go and tell the planning board you don't like this, and they're a democratic entity. I didn't understand it that way. I must have not gotten that memo, but my understanding was that the planning board applies the law. And if a company or a business has meets the criteria of that zone, whatever it may be zoned as, the planning board does not have the discretion to just say, well, we don't like this business because there's 50 people here that don't like it. They have to apply the law, and it's not a democratic, you know, we're not going to go with this business because we don't like it. So from my perspective, there's no tools being lost. In fact, I think it would be a way to get the town on board, and if there was a business that people clearly felt was a good business, it is certainly not a high test to meet to get an attorney's opinion, put it to the town voters. We're talking about maybe $3 grand, $4 grand to get a warrant, to print up the ballots and whatnot, get the attorney to go to Superior Court, which they give him discretion. And for those reasons and more, I'm against this amendment completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Mr. Fillion.
My whole question on this is we're just confusing the issue, and I think we ought to leave it as it now stands and let the voters at the final session vote to whether they want to rescind it or not. And if you put 0, I'm even confused as to, that means you are leaving the bonding authority in place. It's, to me, that's more confusing than if you just left it the way it is and allow the voters to vote. They can understand. You want to rescind it, yes or no? But if you vote to rescind, change it to 0, I think a lot of people will be confused on what they're voting on. Thank you.
I don't, Mr. Madej looks like he wants to say something again, but sure.
I just want to echo what Mr. Fillion said. I absolutely agree with that.
Move the question.
There is, the question has been moved.
Move the question on the amendment. I mean, let's
Which
vote
means
on
we're
the
voting on the
amendment.
amendment.
Yeah, let's do that. I agree.
Yes.
Who made the second to the motion for the amendment?
It was someone way in the back row.
You should be saying the people's names.
Will the person that seconded, this thing doesn't feel like it's working. Will the person that seconded the amendment please raise their hand again just so that the clerk can. You can get, I mean, they just need a name for the record. Thank you. So the question has been called, so we'll now be cease debate. Wait a minute. Procedurally, I'm new at this. No, because you never gave me the first one, then. Well, I know, I'm sorry, because you didn't give this to me before the other one. I just took it to mean that it was for this. So you're good to go. Let's see about it. Yeah. So to call the question, so I have to ask, get straight all the amendments here. Yeah. So we have to get a vote from the body to call the question. And we're just gonna do a raised hands because it requires 2/3. So we're going to need counts of this one. If you are in favor of calling the question, ceasing, it's just majority?
Yeah, this one is just a majority.
We'll look it up while we're counting your hands. If you're in favor of calling the question on the amendment, not on the entire article, this is just on the amendment, calling the question on the amendment to change the dollar value to 0, raise your hand. This is to call the question. This is to say no more debate on the amendment.
No more debate.
Oh, to limit debate?
Just on the amendment.
On the amendment.
Right.
And then we haven't, then we vote on the
amendment.
amendment.
To end the debate.
If you're opposed, put your hands down, please. Thank you. If you're opposed, raise your hand. No, that's good. Hey, that's exactly what you want. I want, if people don't understand. What we are voting on right now is to call the question on the amendment, which means to cease debate and then actually vote on the amendment.
Oh.
So I cannot cease debate on this. I can't call the question unless the town votes to call the question. So do you want to stop talking about the amendment and then vote on the amendment? Raise your hand. All right, put your hands down. If you want to keep talking about the amendment, raise your hand. One guy. I'm sorry, sir. It's democracy in action. So the question has been called. We will now have a secret ballot vote on the amendment, not on the entire article. The secret ballot on the amendment to change the number in the article from $3,250,000 to $0. And yes.
So if you vote yes, you're in favor of this warrant article. No, you're.
Hey, everyone, if you could please pay attention.
Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, shall the town vote to rescind $0 of bond authority, is that correct?
That is correct.
So
If I may, are we having any discussion?
No.
the question has been called. So we are now going to secret ballot, if the clerks will hand out the secret ballots.
What are we voting?
So we are going on secret ballot.
On the amendment?
One more time, everyone. I know we're getting kind of like lost down the rabbit hole on this one. We are voting on the amendment. Hey, if I could have your attention real quick, we'll try to clarify this. It's getting hot. It's getting late. So the vote is to change the language of the first phrase of Article 8 to say, shall the town vote to rescind $0 of bonding authority for the Black Bear Tax Increment Finance District? That is the change. That's true. Yeah. So what's going to happen? What I'm saying is, if you vote yes on that, it means you want to change that $3,250,000 to 0. And if you vote no, it means you want to keep the article the way it is currently written. Yes, Mr. Levy.
If it's 0, does that mean the town can't bond anything?
No.
No.
You already have 3 points.
Any further points of inquiry on the voting? Okay. Yeah. All right. Please pass out the secret ballots.
They have to come up.
All right. There you go. All right. You're going to come single file up past the clerks, and they will hand you a note.